Welcome to Pentecost Sunday, the coming of the Holy Spirit. I've chosen readings, the first two from the vigil readings and the gospel for the Sunday, the day reading. A little bit confusing. Anyway, coming of the Holy Spirit. Have you ever heard the phrase, babbling idiot? You know where that really comes from? A babbling idiot. It comes from the Tower of Babel. Today's first reading from the book of Genesis. And that is one of many stories in the beginning of the book of Genesis. Adam and Eve, and Cain and Abel, and Noah and the ark, and all of them. And the last is this one, the Tower of Babel. Well, what does that have to do with the coming of the Holy Spirit? Well, personally, I think a lot. For example, just look at the world and see how much sin or disunity there is in the world. Look at the Eastern world and the Western world. Are we united? Look at the third world and our world. I never knew this, but when you talk about the third world, well, what's the first world and what's the second world about the third world? You know, third world, all those countries that don't have much. Not really. NATO classified this as first, second, and third world. The first world was United States and Western Europe. The second world was the Soviet Union, or Russia, and China, and Cuba. And the third world was all of the others. And all of the others, were in particular, were Africa, and Asia, Latin America. The third, second, and first worlds. Are we united? I'm tired of hearing and tired of dealing with the disunity in our federal government. And sometimes people say our state government, but I think our state government works better than our federal government. And then the church is stop there, Larry. Don't talk anymore about the church. Sometimes our families are disunited. And often I am disunited, or you are disunited with your true self. So start there, of the coming of the Holy Spirit to unite me, to help me become the great creation God has called me to be. In these stories, this last story, as I say, the Tower of Babel, chapter 11, verses 1 to 9. Well, after that, start 11:10 begins history with Abraham, the father of the Jewish people, 1850 BC. All the stories before him are just stories, but oh, do they tell the truth about what the world is like. And the world has been sinful and disunited way before Abraham and way before the written word. You go back 4 or 5 millennia before Christ when the written word begins. And so, well, what's the answer to all this disunity that we see in the Tower of Babel and the languages, and they can't understand one another? Well, the answer simply is Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And I think the answer is, and it starts with an explanation that I like, is in the gospel, in the day's Mass for coming of the Holy Spirit. Very short. Jesus, on Easter Sunday evening, the doors being locked. He says, peace be with you. Jesus comes to bring peace, you and the world. Receive the Holy Spirit, whose sins you forgive or forgiven. So we're called to forgive countries or me. I am called to forgive you or any other person that sins against me. That's the solution. And the coming of the Holy Spirit is the solution. The Holy Spirit came on the early church 50 days after the resurrection in a very special, powerful way. Well, that too is presented in a funny way, strong wind and tongues of fire and a loud voice. But that's the Spirit of Jesus. That's the Holy Spirit. May be projected in wind and fire and voice and so forth, but really probably comes in my mind and in my heart, in my prayer, and in through my baptism and confirmation. The Holy Spirit comes to me, to us, to the world. Do I really listen to the Holy Spirit? Do I listen to Jesus, the Spirit of Jesus? Or do I just go around in my mad way like a whirling dervish or a babbling idiot? Which brings us back to the coming of the Holy Spirit in that first reading, which I think is very good. To summarize it all, it's sort of like on Friday morning in the prayer in the breviary, it talks about this Tower of Babel. And it asks us, the last two verses are this: free every heart from pride and self-reliance. Our ways of thought inspire us with simple grace. Break down among us barriers of defiance. Speak to the soul of all the human race. The final verse. Teach us, good Lord, to serve the needs of others. Help us to give and not to count the cost. Unite us all, for we are born as brothers and sisters. Defeat our Babel with your Pentecost. Do I listen to the Spirit in my life? Have a good day.